Hi guys, I am back to show you the best easy homemade guacamole recipe that you have ever eaten. And yes, even better than your favorite restaurants. I personally feel that guacamole gets a bad rap because people just see this bright green blob in a bowl and immediately turn their noses up. And if you've ever tasted a bad one, I totally get it, but that's not the case with this recipe. My guacamole recipe is full of flavor and texture. So the first thing I've done is I've taken my perfectly ripe avocados, I'm cutting them in half, I'm showing you how beautiful they are. Then we're just going to remove that big seed in the middle, and just like that, you just kind of smack it with the blade of the knife and twist, and it'll pop right out for you. So let's talk about texture. In my fresh guacamole recipe, there's crunch from the red onion, spice from the jalapeno, and freshness from the tomato, not to mention the delicious hint of garlic in the background. It's not only tasty, but it's interesting too, and that's something that I find missing from most restaurant and store-bought guacamoles. Now, the easiest way to scoop out your avocado is just to take a spoon and kind of slide around the edges until you get underneath it, and it will also pop out for you just like that. Okay, back to the guacamole. Of course, the most important thing is flavor. Most restaurant guacamoles to me lack flavor. They barely even have enough salt, and overall they just taste like smashed avocados. That's not what the best guacamole recipe is supposed to taste like, at least in my opinion, and I love avocados. I'm not trying to mask their flavor, but guac recipes are supposed to be flavorful, and technically maybe my version isn't an authentic guacamole, but it sure tastes good. Now we just want to smash our avocados. I like to use a potato masher or just a large fork like this, and you get to determine how chunky or how smooth you like your guacamole to be. Personally, I like mine on the smoother side. If there was one thing that I would advise you to make sure of, it's that you use fresh ingredients. The tomatoes need to be fresh so that their texture isn't sacrificed, and also your avocados. And if you're wondering how to choose the perfect avocado, your friend is going to be your hands. Just give the avocado a press with your thumb, and you want it to be able to make an indentation in the avocado but still have a very slight firmness. If your avocado is not ready, then it's going to be too hard, and texturally it's not going to be a good experience to eat in your guacamole. And if it's overripe and super soft, then the color is going to be sacrificed and it's probably going to be brown. At this point, I've already added my seasonings to my guacamole, and then I took my tomatoes. I used some grape tomatoes, but of course you can chop up any tomato that you have. I think Roma tomatoes are really good for this because they don't have a ton of juice. All right, the last ingredient you simply cannot leave out, and it needs to be fresh, is the cilantro. Now, fresh cilantro has the power to change guacamole and salsa for the better. And many times people make these two popular Mexican dips and they leave this ingredient out, and then they wonder why their recipe doesn't taste like their restaurant version or even authentically Mexican. It's the cilantro. And even as I say this, I am cringing because in just a minute you're going to see that my cilantro looks a little less than fresh, but I promise I bought it just a day or two ago. For some reason, he just looks a little sad, but the flavor is still there. Now for the jalapenos, what I like to do is I'm using one jalapeno. I'm going to cut it in half, and I remove the seeds from one half of it, but I leave the seeds in the other half. To me, this gives me the perfect level of spice. Obviously, if you like it spicier, you can keep the seeds in completely and chop it up. Or if you're a little nervous about spice, then remove all of the seeds and then chop it up. And I am definitely making sure that my tomatoes, my onions, and my jalapenos are all finely diced. I really don't like biting into really big pieces in guacamole. Okay, last but certainly not least, and it is definitely not a requirement, but it makes this appetizer snack super special. It's homemade tortilla chips. Listen, fresh tortilla chips are ridiculously easy, and they're quick to make, and the flavor is second to none. They are totally worth what little effort they take to make them. And not to mention, they are super impressive for your party guest, assuming that you're making this for some type of gathering. Now the last ingredient I'm going to add to my guacamole It just might be the most important. Well, I really can't say that because avocados are kind of the star here, but fresh lime juice is just chef's kiss. This is what brings so much fresh flavor to so many Mexican dishes. There really is not much of a substitute for fresh lime juice, and it is amazing in guacamole, but it's also wonderful used as a marinade. Okay, let me show you how easy tortilla chips are to make. You're going to take some corn tortillas and you're going to cut them in half, then turn your halves around and cut them again, and you have triangles. Now, you could cut them another time and you would have smaller chips, totally fine. But here is the tip and the trick for crispy tortilla chips. Let your tortillas, your corn tortillas, dry out and even get a little bit stale. That will ensure a super crispy tortilla chip at home. Then I just took some avocado oil in a cast iron skillet, heated it up to about 350 degrees, and then I fried the tortilla chips for about 1 to 2 minutes, and I always turn them over to make sure they get crispy on both sides. When they're done frying, I simply remove them from the hot oil, put them on a paper towel lined cutting board, and then immediately sprinkle salt on them, and they are ready to eat. Many people think that making a good guacamole or even homemade tortilla chips at home isn't possible or easy, but both of those things couldn't be farther from the truth. Guacamole might be the easiest dip to make at the house. There's no cooking involved, just chopping and dropping into a bowl, seasoning and mixing well. And the little bit of cooking that you have to do to make homemade tortilla chips is merely minutes. Hopefully, I have convinced you to save money and time and make this amazing dish at home. As always, the full recipe, all of the ingredients and measurements are found on the blog. The link is in the description. You have to make it, guys. You have to.